Get back in the game. If you missed the bucket, you got to take it again. It's the same thing. If you missed the quarter, hit the next one.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sports to Business podcast. I'm so excited today because we have Cedric Clark on our episode, on our podcast. Welcome to the show, Cedric.
Hey, man. Thanks, Tanvir. And I tell you what, as a podcaster, a new podcaster in 2020, I'm excited to be on and hopefully learn some of the tricks of the trade. I've been kind of studying up and seeing some of the things you do. So proud of your work, man, and excited to connect with you.
I appreciate it. And I was going to do a quick introduction for you. And one of the things I want to introduce was you're also a podcast host. So a lot of stuff for me to learn. I heard your first episode. A lot of great things that I'm sure the viewers and listeners are going to have a ton to take away from our episode today. Yeah. I'm excited, man. We, I kind of have behind me the DäBU Podcast. Yeah. We started that right after the George Floyd incident. And my co-host Kojo Mensah-Bonsu, we just get into topics, and DABU, it's diverse athletes turned business leaders that are trying to unlock their unlimited potential. So that's how we approached it. So it's pretty fun, man. Pretty fun. Amazing. Doesn't get any better than that. So Cedric, you played basketball for Washington State. Then you went on the corporate journey that a lot of student athletes, we'll talk about it today, have a really hard time transitioning. You made the jump to Walmart. You worked your way up as an executive. And today you are overseeing all of the operations for Sam's Club. So you're VP of Ops there. I mean, what a remarkable story. What a remarkable journey. Can't love to dive into all this, man.
Yeah. Like it's surreal to think of, we have a similar journey of sports, and even you trying out, professionally, I kind of did the same thing, but to think it lead me to, running a multi-billion-dollar, Fortune 1 company that Sam's Club is a part of, it's kind of crazy, man. And it's about humble beginnings, right? I think that's the biggest thing I'll share, just right off the bat is, starting as an hourly associate in the professional world also gives you this vantage point of, who you always should be working for. Yes, we take care of the customer members, but as an associate myself, I try to think back every morning when I wake up, like, what type of support would I need? And I think that helps keep my North Star where it needs to be. So
it also puts you in perspective that, hey, what you got you here is what's going to keep you here. It's like every year there's training camp. If you don't perform in training camp, you're out.
You ain't gonna make it. Absolutely. It's real, man. It is real. Yeah.
So that's a great perspective too. But hey, what are you doing today? And so you're VP of Operations at Sam's Club. What else are you doing? What does that mean? Let's talk about a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So when you think of kind of leading operations for Sam's Club, we're supporting a, almost $70 billion business this year, obviously with COVID and being an essential business. It's kind of crazy. And a few things that we've jumped into is kind of, immersing into our digital side. So we're in the club channel. So some people know of Costco. We compete directly with them. And so one of the things we did, we have even a scan and go type of application where you can actually order all of your stuff on your phone and check out that way. And then we did curbside and concierge. You think about trying to be contactless, Tanvir, in this environment. That was probably one of the biggest, lead business type of initiatives that we drove, and it's been very successful. So really cool, man. Really cool business too.
I've launched a few apps. So I launched an app recently for a public trading company, a business called Freshie. And the biggest gap that I've seen that I wanted to really fix, right? And even businesses before that was when the tech team does not talk to the operations.
Yes.
It's crazy, right? And you can't just roll out an app. You can't just roll out a click and collect unless you talk to the people at the store. It's crazy how many times tech teams just say, hey, we know what the hell we're doing. Let's just go. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And I assume, with you being on that side, like I'm reading a book, Doing Agile Right. And it really talks about flattening out organizations and creating an engineer mindset, which is more collaborative, and collaborative is the end user all the way to the end user being the associate. So I'm so with you, because what happens is if we don't feel good about what you're putting in our hands, we're definitely not going to use it. Yeah, absolutely. Usage isn't going to be high. So
or like a customer comes into the store and they're like, hey, my loyalty points aren't showing up. Well, they're like, I don't know what the hell this is.
And it's over. Then it's over. Like, you're welcome. The operations team has absolutely blown up your opportunity for this app to be successful.
Oh man. That's awesome. Yeah. So Cedric, let's take a step back. Let's start off with when you were growing up. Well, so where did you grow up? How did you get into basketball? And I remember hearing your podcast, and you bring up this concept about the golden child, golden boy.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to dive into that, man.
Yeah. So kind of life was in the South, born in Sumter, South Carolina, but was only there for a small period of time. But my early childhood was kind of in Birmingham, Alabama. And what I will say in growing up, I was supposed to be an accomplished pianist, to be frank with everyone. My grandma had this vision of me being in Carnegie Hall and playing, with the symphony. And, at 4 years old, she had already put me in front of a piano and I started lessons. And gosh, by 5 or 6 years old, I was practicing up to 1 to 2 hours a day. And then later I ended up practicing to 3 to 4 hours. But what I would say, Tanvir, is one of the things with that is my grandma see me as kind of this golden child, and even at, looking at, colorism, my skin tone was lighter than anyone in my family. And to be frank with you, she just thought I'd maybe have a better opportunity and she was going to do some unique things, which was great, right? It's a great perspective. But one thing about me though, Tanvir, I always had someone got a basketball in my hand and I just always loved the sport of basketball. I love that orange ball, was my first experience with it. And to be honest, as I grew up in Birmingham, we ended up moving up to the Great Northwest, Seattle, Washington. And that was when we moved in a house that had a park literally only 200 yards away. And if I wasn't practicing my music, Tanvir, I was over in that park getting some jumpers up. And then, later on, as I got older, I didn't play any, organized sports until around maybe, the 7th grade. But I played at the YMCA. We had a late night program that kept, youth off the street. Yep. And I would go down to downtown Tacoma and, I call it the school of hard knocks, man. You had the older guys, the high schoolers, and a few times I would throw the ball between their legs and get a layup. And I got known pretty quick at being a pretty good basketball player. And that's when I started to say, okay, maybe this sport might not be a bad thing as well,
Maybe maybe you saw a spark that, hey, there's something here.
Yes. Yeah. So that was really it. And then I moved to Germany, Tanvir, and, part of that journey was, I wasn't going to be in the States, right, to go to these camps. I mean, you lived in, when you think of Canada, coming to the United States, if you're going to play NFL, NBA, or get to college in the nation, USA, you got to get to some of these camps. And so I kind of missed out, man, on all that. And, it was just a journey of I call it the road less traveled. Sometimes that road less traveled keeps you focused and disciplined on, still striving for your goal, which, hopefully I'll bring some more light to that a little bit later. But, really, I feel fortunate in how I was raised, and I feel grateful for the opportunity, to be afforded the right to play sports, later on in my career.
So walk me through what happened after Germany. So how do you find your way to the NCAA?
Yeah, so I actually showed up, man. So this is crazy. I have my stepdad's mom, my grandmother lives in Tucson, Arizona, and so my parents were still staying in Germany. So I was leaving the coop, but they were going to still be in Germany. So they're like, we don't really trust you going anywhere. And I applied to University of Arizona and showed up there. And I said, you know what, I'm going to try to make the basketball team. And I actually got a tryout. I was one of 2 people that got a tryout, but I didn't make the team. And believe it or not, guess what the coach told me, man? Coach Johnson is the name. He used to be he actually was a head coach for USC. He said, hey, you know what you should do? We've had a player that used to be a practice player for the girls, and that would be a good thing for you to do. And on your journey, maybe to make the team, it would be a good start. And, I had to go home and swallow my pride for about 24 hours and say, you know what, that would probably be the closest to a student athlete that I would get, because I would mirror their schedule and I would engage in their lifting activities. So I ended up doing it. And to be frank with you, I thought it kept me out of a lot of trouble, and not just being a student and, actually getting me close to a courtside seat to the national championship year with, Mike Bibby, Jason Terry, Michael Dickerson, Miles Simon. That was just amazing. And whether I wasn't on the team or not, I showed up to their practices and began to understand, what does it mean to be a Division I athlete? And there's a lot of discipline, consistency, determination that you need to be able to do that. So that's where that started. And then we got to the end of that year and I was like, you know what, I'm not going to make this team, probably with Mike Bibby coming back. Jason Terry wasn't even starting at the time. So, I have an aunt that lives in the state of Washington, and I had a cousin that went to Washington State, applied there and said, I'm going to try to do this darn thing all over again. And I showed up there, and I just was not going to be denied, man. So, you know, Coach Rosborough was the associate head coach at University of Arizona, put in a word for me to say, you should take a look at this guy. And then they shared with me, Tanvir, where they were doing their, preseason conditioning. And I showed up in my normal gear and they didn't tell me no. And so I did the whole preseason conditioning with them, not in, you know, athletic issued gear. And, you know, by the end of that year, when it came to tryouts, I actually played in the first practice. They gave me a jersey and then I had to try out, and I'm trying out in the Washington State University practice uniform. And I ended up making the team. And from there, man, I never looked back. I was not going to slow down on this dream that I got to taste finally.
That's so powerful, man. That's huge. You know, you brought up a great point, Cedric. You said you weren't going to get denied, but what I'm seeing here is that you swallowed your pride and you did the thing that most people wouldn't do. And you know, the funny thing is, a lot of people in this podcast, a lot of great executives, Fortune 500 executives, they all say the same thing. Do the shit that others don't want to do.
Facts.
Right?
Facts. Yes, man. Like the fact that I even chose to go play and swallow my pride, man, to play with the women's team. The coach probably wouldn't have given me that recommendation
exactly
to get into that meeting, because they're like, this dude is willing to do whatever it takes. And for those executives out there, you know, we'll talk a little later, but, you know, I think the adversity quotient is something that past athletes, former athletes, they just, to me, they rate high on that scale. And it's just one of these scenarios where you're just like, you know, I come heck or high water, you know, I'm going to figure this out. And, you know, it kind of goes into when you and I were on teams, there's components of that as well that kind of drive that discipline as well for us.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up the word adversity, right? So walk me through how your college career, I mean, you've already touched on, you know, trying out and going hard, but how did the 4 years at Washington, how did that prepare you to handle adversity, right?
Interesting, man. Like for me, I think it prepared me on a journey of, you know, like what is truly success and what is winning. And I think you're shortchanged when you look at winning being in sports, being the at the end of the buzzer, the scoreboard, because as you and I know, there's small wins and losses within that whole dynamic. And if you're playing against a team that's outmatched, a lot of times it's, you know, did you stay with your game plan? Did you maybe play them and beat the odds and playing them harder than others? Or maybe you beat them, right? The crowd rushes the floor, you beat UCLA. But when I transition that into what I'm doing now, it's just, I actually have had experience with success and failure, and understand success doesn't come without failure. And failure to me is just a moment in time, and it's a mindset. And then you got to pick yourself back up and you got to go put in the work to try to make sure you can change that outcome the next time. Do
you think we should change the definition of failure?
I think failure is not final. That's one of the things I always tell my team. Failure is not final. Failure is only final if you choose to put, you know, the end of your book being that chapter. Failure to me is basically the framework of your story. That's not for you. It's maybe to help someone else get through something. And so as I've, you know, I call it self-therapy in the podcast world, Tanvir, as you've experienced, as I've gone through my journey of my story and listened to stories of others, I'm like, wait a second, if I would have had that thought process in that moment of failure to say that would have set me up for the biggest success that I've had in my life, I would take 7 of those. I take 10 of those. But in the moment, our feelings are so important in humanity, in human nature. And at times that can get the best of us when, you know, really the challenge is how do you get the framework back of that mind to say, well, what do you have your mind on? And then this could be a mini failure, right? And this could be something that can, you know, be a catalyst to your next journey. And
also judgment, right? So quick story on my end, right? Like right after my MBA, I went to ExxonMobil. High paying job, great career. I mean, you stay there for a year. Everybody knows it's like long-term. Everybody there was like 30 years in there.
And I've heard that in the oil business. Yeah.
It's crazy. And I was like, okay, but everybody's like, first time to go to university in my family, they're like, hey, this is awesome. Now you're going to be set for life. You're going to stay here. You're going to have $1.5 million in pension when you're 65. A year later, I'm like, this isn't for me. Right. 1 year later, I'm like, it's too slow. It's not fast enough. I want to be somewhere very meritocratic. And I think I was, you know, credit to me a little bit and tooting my horn. I decided to quit anyways and go somewhere else to try because I was like, this isn't what I want. But the amount of people that came to me and said, hey, what the hell are you doing?
You're making a mistake, probably, right?
A mistake. It looked good on your resume. and it's all about judgment. So me, it was like, hey, it's like, this guy had a great job, but now he left, and especially in the Indian culture, it's like it's all about show and tell. Who had the bigger house, who's did the best job, whose kids went to school, right?
Right.
So that is so common, right? And a lot of times when we fail, and my business after that I didn't enjoy that, but that allowed me to fail so that I can go somewhere else. If I had looked at that moment, it's like, oh shit, I failed. Everybody's already thinking, hey, this guy made a mistake. And if I had said that's the end of my chapter, I would have probably been down the hole again, right? And it all started from judgment, from what I could see back then. Now I look back, it's like, hey, if I just blocked out all that negativity of what people were thinking, it was just a part of the plan where I had to leave, try something, fail. And if I didn't fail, I wouldn't have ended up in the technology space that I'm in today. Like that's how cool it was, right?
Yeah, and you wouldn't have delivered apps to Fortune 500 companies. As you look at your history, you wouldn't be coaching executives on the journey of success. And even looking at the picture behind you, you think of the cheetah that's there. Could you imagine if the cheetah was told that the lion is the king of the jungle, so you shouldn't even show up to try to get food? They would just starve. And to that point, I love what you're saying. But it's interesting for me and you, as we've gone on that athletic journey, there's this prove it mentality that we kind of hold on that I think pushes us through. Pushes us through these dynamics where everyone maybe looks at this differently. I mean, I remember times people are like, why are you waking up at 5 a.m., for practice? Like, is it worth it? And it's like, it is what it is. Like, this is my job. This is what I've chosen to do.
Yeah, it's like people are like, hey, I mean, a lot of people come to me and say, hey, why do you wake up at 5 a.m? You should be spending your time sleeping in so you can work. You can spend more time at work. I'm like, if I don't work out, I can't work. Like,
right. Come on, man. Yeah. We're kindred spirits on that, man. Like, I think that's where our journeys are similar. And I feel like I've had an unorthodox, approach in my career in sports, and even when I got to, Walmart. But, at the end of the day, man, like, if I take out any part of my past, I'm not sitting here today. That's where I feel convicted.
Absolutely. So on that note, Cedric, what did basketball teach you about life? I think we talked about that, but how about business? So what have you applied in business that you learn on the court in practice as a student athlete, in the NCAA?
Yeah. So there's always a mission, right? So you and I know there's always a mission, whether it's mission critical for the organization to deliver, sales, the best experience to a member, or the mission of beating this team that's coming into your house today. When you break up the mission, though, it's broken up to iterative milestones. So, then there's framework of, who must deliver on these milestones? So then you get to the part that I didn't even know I was engaging in becoming, a leader with, was we got teams. You got teams to deliver those milestones. And then I'll just go back to a basketball component, and even with what you did in football, the scouting report. That scouting report was the framework of what was our mission, and then giving you details on what, we needed or who needed to do what to accomplish that. And then when you think about that scouting report, then it comes into, what did it teach me in business? You got to trust, and then you got to reframe trust. No one's perfect. So in this working environment, and in even the sports environment, we're all imperfectly perfect people, right? And that's what's crazy about that. And then you're challenged to find rationale on how do you get back up when maybe someone didn't fall on the ball that was a fumble, or they didn't make the pass, or at work they don't deliver on a time frame, or they don't get an account that they need. And so then you get put back in this scenario where you're like, okay, I got to step back and say to myself, okay, now we have to have leadership agility to figure out where we have to go. But I feel like I could go down the list of even my exposure to practice all the way to a game. I think it's only different in the professional setting on just me maybe not, having to have my heart rate at 160 or 170 to get that done.
The same pressure, right? The one thing that I miss is, and this is, I think you bring this to your team. I can tell in the first 20 minutes of this podcast, you bring this to your team every day. A lot of leaders are content taking on teams or being a part of a team that is not great, even though it can be better.
Yes.
In business.
Yes.
I don't understand that. I don't know why we would not strive to be the best at work.
Yeah, I think though, so, kind of going into pressure situations, right? And you and I are in pressure situations, whether you're delivering something to a Fortune 500 company, I'm trying to lead a business in the Fortune 500 company, to play sports at the highest level, we had to gain an optimal level of performance. That was really out of in our first start of it, it was out of our body scope until we began to engage in there. So with that, there's this almost esoteric class of individuals that we were a part of, even just saying we played Division I sports. And then there's this seemingly elite class that cultivates a confidence, in my opinion, that's only experienced by immortals. So with that experience that I had in sports, I felt like I was at the upper echelon physically in what I've done. And you had to have a mental acuity as well. But then now when I pull that into work, I evaporate pressure, because that 10,000 rule that Malcolm Gladwell talks about in his book, Outliers, if you do it over and over and over again, what becomes the mission and then the detailed actions on it, if you've been doing that, you'll actually be able to deliver on it. And then you're not thinking about what is going on with that. Mm-hmm. And so it's so funny when we talk about pressure, for you and I, we've probably pushed our bodies to limits that we never thought we could. And then when we operated that limit consistently in comparison maybe to the average Joe, they see you as like you're an alien. And to us, that's actually normal. And so then I bring that same mindset and even bravado into my business world. Wow. You're not gonna knock me down. Like if I don't gotta be tired and out of breath, then I can really deliver on this, because this is just gonna be think tank.
I was chatting with somebody this morning actually, and they brought a page from a book that I believe Mike Babcock wrote, and it was about, if you are preparing, you're going to be finding success. If you find success, you're going to want to work harder. If you work harder, you want to outperform yourself again. Wow. Because you want to outperform yourself, you want to prepare again, and you keep on repeating the same action again and again until you elevate your performance.
That's right? So good. I mean, that's like a performance sustainable productivity loop, right? Like, man, right? Yeah, there you go, man. That's what we're all trying to get to one day. Yeah, that's good. Awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, I think like from a team's perspective, it's like, I think we need more leaders to embody that, right? Embody that if I'm in a team environment, I want to do the best that I can to get my business, whatever the mission is, if it's same store sales, opening new stores, whatever that is, we want to align ourselves to just go after that. 3 to 5 actions we're going to do every single day that are going to get us there. Simple, hard knocks, just keep it going, right?
Well, and I'll say this, what's simple is understood and what's understood is executed. And I'll say that from an operations standpoint, if you don't get me something simplistic in my hands that I can rally, our 100,000 associate workforce around, it could be the biggest mistake. But if it is simplistic and it's really easy to connect with, it's like you strike gold. And so, yeah, what's simple is understood and what's understood is executed. And I live by that model in my business.
So on a side note, Cedric, I'm actually curious, when COVID happened, right? How did you operationalize your entire fleet of 600 stores, everybody at those stores, to go and do all these different, how was that like? What was the mission? What was the vision there?
First things first, when COVID hit and we all kind of had an understanding of, how it could impact your life, we immediately went into, for our members and our associates, the safety environment. And so the first thing we had to do, Tanvir, was create protocols. Being an essential business, I think you're blessed, but at the same time, it's high risk, high reward, meaning we have to have framework of being able to make people that come to work that are still involved in putting their life on the line with COVID to feel comfortable. So, from, having to do temperature checks with contactless devices to even the questions you have to ask, because even if their temperature was good, but they've been around with someone that has COVID, like, I think that was the biggest thing we had to do. And then, I feel like the latter part of the journey for the year was managing the fatigue, man. Like, coming there every day and seeing the news and seeing the cases go up, but still you're going into harm's way, and you're just as important as a healthcare provider in, providing toilet paper and the essentials. That was really tough. And so we did virtual tours. We used Zoom to actually virtually tour the club, and, to make sure I didn't put them in harm's way or the team didn't put them in harm's way. And I will tell you, our team probably had some of our better engagement scores as we did our engagement assessments. And, thinking of everything we were dealing with, like, we actually beat last year. So that, to me, that's huge. So really, I'm really proud of the team. But those, to give you some insights, it was crazy, but health and well-being was the number one focus throughout this entire time.
How do you, as a leader, get your team, or how did you get your team to believe in your strategy, right? And this can be in COVID or any even later on. How do you get them on the mission that, hey, what I'm telling you, you might not, nobody has to believe in your mission 100%, but they have to execute it, right? It's just like you might not believe in the coach's play, but once you're on the court, you have to go and execute it because that's the best thing for the team. How do you bring people on the journey with you?
Yeah, uniquely, some things we did was we took a little bit of getting insight and leveraging, even external feeds and news to show our team what was going on out there. Because a lot of times it's just who you're talking to say there's a conspiracy, this, that, and other. So we gave facts, and then we actually showed, like on some of my meetings, we would show like the news feeds, and you would see where, in some of these countries, people are in the hospitals and things like that. So that immediately, Tanvir, captivated their thought process, say, okay, I have my leader who I trust is showing me this. And then after that, we had to model it. So even if we did come in the clubs, gloves, all the PPE, like I modeled that, staying, 6 feet from each other, even though you want to come in and shake hands or even do a fist pump. Part of that was modeling it, which then said, okay, like they're actually doing this, which means this is real. And then after that, we used to talk to some of the leaders to talk about testimonials. We had several, unfortunately, Tanvir, we had several leaders that lost people. And so when we got on the calls, when they had to walk through maybe losing a significant other or a mother or a father, it would convict everyone else to say, you know what, we're not out of the weeds. And the fact that we're essential workers, we have to be even that much more into the details, into the weeds, because we are modeling, and we should show the United States that we're grateful to be an essential business. And that's really how we approached it. And I'm so grateful for the teams we do have, because I will tell you, we probably operated, I feel like we mitigated a lot of issues. They weren't happening in the Sam's Clubs, and how we were doing contact tracing and following up and cleanings and things like that. So really proud of the team.
Well, kudos to your entire team. That's awesome. Very, very good to hear that. It reminds me of a concept, Cedric, where as a leader, you never want to be the first one to leave.
Right.
Yes. And now I'm thinking back, right? So when we used to do these weightlifting sessions at 11 p.m., our coach would always be the last one to leave the gym. And even at practice, coach would always be there, right? And I think that means a lot. It's like if your coach believing in yourself, then you have to push yourself. And I think similarly, if you were in there with the equipment on and you were visiting clubs, it's like, hey, this guy's doing it. We all got to. They work for you because they don't want to let you down.
Yeah, and to your point, you got to tell them that, and sometimes explain the why, right? Sometimes, is the coach just there to turn out the lights? And no, the coach is actually there seeing who else is staying the latest to put in the work. So he understands he needs to reward that behavior. And I always believe this: people, they will forget what you say. They will forget at times, how things that you did, but they'll never forget, how you made them feel. And that, that was a North Star too, a North Compass moment for me when I thought about how would I be able to do this by, modeling this myself. Yeah.
What did you, from your basketball career, Cedric, bring with you on a personal level, right? So, how do you make sure you're always pushing hard? How do you come back to the methodology of always executing? What are some of those values that you brought with you today that you're seeing yourself in the business environment?
And I think I can speak for you too, Tanvir. Probably the biggest foundational points was discipline and consistency. The discipline to show up when physically you're not going to feel good. You remember the trash cans, right, that they set around.
First one every summer, first practice.
Saying like, who's going to be the first one, right, to see? And then at the end of the day, part of it was a good workout, because part of this actually is pushing you what I call to that limit. So that, discipline and consistency is important. And then when I think of consistency, the best ability is availability. And I'll say that in our world, if you don't have people showing up to work, you can't get the best out of them or even the worst out of them. That would be something better than them not being there. So, for me, I can say this, I didn't have any injuries. I never missed a game. Thinking about being a walk-on, there's probably times when I played through something that I maybe should have had them look at, but at the end of the day, I just felt like, the team's overall goal was more important than sometimes my, personal, selfish thoughts on, hey, man, like I can maybe sit this out. But those ones are big ones that I think about for me, discipline and consistency, that I definitely use every single day. And I really challenge my team. Like that's what I infuse into my teams, because that, to me, on the long haul, this is a long game. you win over time with that.
It's a marathon, right?
It is.
How do you get yourself, and maybe this is a question that you can answer for a lot of leaders listening or watching, emerging leaders that know they have to pick it up a notch, right? Sometimes they don't feel like waking up at 5. Some days they don't feel like going that extra mile. How do you get yourself to just show up, even if you feel like shit? How do you still show up and say, even though I'm not gonna have a best day, I still gotta go and lift a bunch of weights. I still gotta go and call some clients. I still have to go and make sure I oversee all these presentations for the board meeting. How do you get yourself to do that consistently?
I think humility is always important, but I think there's this dynamic of confidence that we all have to display. And if you really think you not showing up isn't going to matter in a business that you run, I would say to the leaders out there, you're selling yourself short and you actually impact more than you think. So one of the things that I always do to myself is, I not only want to be there for my team, but there's a unique set of skills that I bring to enhance our performance. And I don't want to miss that day. And I do agree, in this environment of COVID, if someone's not feeling good or they're displaying symptoms, it's not a time to be heroic. But in the balance of just maybe not feeling great, you got to engage in there. But here's the other thing I'll say to you for you and I, part of this on our journey of sports and athletics, you also have to be a 360 leader. And sometimes we think this mental fog that we have is just like, I'm just having a bad day. And sometimes it's the choices we make with what we're putting in our body. And the first business of order is your body. And so, I went on that journey. I was going to come out of 2021 or come into 2021, not, feeling like I gained the COVID 30. And I will tell you, I'm down 30 pounds, man, since November, because exactly what you say. I get up 5 every morning and I walk, and then I do a 48-minute workout. It's not a day that goes by that there's a choice to not do it. But the alternative for me is actually winning, because when I've felt better, I've had more mental clarity. So for those leaders out there, don't undersell the fact that the fuel for your body, and then how you're actually, this heart muscle, which is the most important muscle in the body. I know the brain's really important, but it needs blood from the heart. You got to keep that thing moving. And then I tell you, you'll have, in some ways, this growth that transpires that you'd never know if you could get even in the best physical shape of your life. And it's not about being a sports model. It's just about being in good shape for you, right? To be able to be active, whether it's with your kids, whether with your family, or for sure with your teams that you get the fortune to lead.
You put it so simply, Cedric. It's awesome. And I really want everybody listening or watching this podcast take this away. If you just focus on your health and your sleep and getting in good shape, that drives your motivation to go to work, which makes you prepare, which makes you execute. And then you keep getting better at your own workout and making sure you're disciplined, which drives your performance at work. Such a great cycle. If you just feed the top of the funnel, if I may call it from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, I like that.
Which is your health. Everything else makes sense.
Well, Tanvir, and then you feel better about yourself. And then it's the song that never ends, right? Exactly. It's like, and then you start to look a little better. And it's funny, like, there's this dynamic in our world on social media too, to shame these dynamics where people are making improvements. And for me, it's not anybody else but yourself. But, take it one day at a time. It's not about getting out and running a marathon. It might just be 10 minutes of walking a night or in the morning, like whatever that takes. But I agree with you. I will continue. I love what you're saying. I'm going to feed that top funnel because I know what that equates to.
Yeah, I saw your story on Instagram, and I can see you're consistent. So, hey, he's not lying. He's there every morning.
Yep, absolutely, boss man. You know it.
Cedric, for executives, so I speak to a lot of executives, and they all relate really well to sports, but not a lot of them have played sports, right? They love the concept. They want to get their teams into a sports mindset, agile, fast. Everybody has to thrive against destruction, right? What are some of the things that they can do today at an executive level to bring some of that tenacity, some of the perseverance into their teams across any department?
Yeah, relentlessly prepare. So preparation is so critical, whether it's a market study, right, to understand your share in correlation to your competitors, or even understanding, the user experience as it relates to any services that you offer. I think a criticality of success is preparation. So, as an athlete, as you know, Tanvir, we have to, our coaches do, but then we relentlessly prepare, over that week. You're you're running sets that are going to be uniquely supportive in helping you potentially beat this opponent. Then I think the next one that's not popular is sacrifice. Sometimes we have to step into the world that we're engaging in and maybe sacrifice some things that we have, I call them sacred cows, that we think were, just, hey, this is just how it is. And as we have teams, leverage the team's experience. Sam Walton, always says for us, the best ideas come from our associates. And I think at times these leaders come in and we want to control, and been there, done that. I'm not saying that past tense. At times you feel like you want to control, but it's really interesting when you relinquish that control to the team and give them autonomy, which is an agile mindset. People will surprise you. So I think that's really important. And then, the last thing I'd say is performance success and performance failures. Again, we're going to end on that word that you and I maybe want to take out of the dictionary. Performance failure is not final. And I know there's times when you're like, this will end my career, but that's just because you're saying that. A lot of times we self-feed ourselves that. And then performance success, when we experience that euphoric milestone or energy, guess what we got to do the next day, Tanvir? We got to put back on the armor, put back on the suit.
Back.
We got to go again. So like part of this is in performance success and failure, have a short memory, right? Don't not appreciate and motivate your teams. Don't not go back and do an after action review or COE on, correction of errors on your failure, but have a short memory, get back in the game. If you missed the bucket, you got to take it again. It's the same thing. If you missed the quarter, hit the next one. So that's what I would, leave to those executives when you think about that, that mindset that you and I have been afforded on our journey of collegiate athletics to now the business world.
It's awesome. And a lot of these executives, I think performance failure is probably one of the biggest roadblocks of trying things out of your comfort zone, because you're like, hey, I got a stable job. We're getting by. I want to rock the boat a little bit, but that, hey, if you take this risk, you might not win, but over time you could move the needle. Yes. It might be that punch that you need to get to the next level, right?
Absolutely. So I'm excited for them to kind of think of that framework. I, have those things written down, and I think about that because every day is a moment to be able to, what happens is they're called lag measures. I usually follow the framework of the 4 disciplines of execution. The results are going to happen whether you want them to or not. How you respond to them, and then what lead measures you engage in to change that performance is going to be up to you.
Awesome. Yeah. And, on the same note, relationships, that's something that we want to ask you, Cedric, because you played on a team that was, let's say, 24 in the offseason, 30, 40, including, freshmen, right? Training, not a lot of them make it. Business, right now, you have a huge team. What have you brought over from a teamwork and a relationship standpoint that a lot of these executives could take away and apply today when they're looking to, whenever people are remote, they need to go back to work and really need to move the needle there?
The big team environment dynamic that I feel like brought over for sports is we all have a unique story and we all have unique interests. And if, you can spend time understanding the WIFM, what is it, what's in it for me? Yeah, you know what that is. Like, that's the term for each of your individual team members. You can begin to tailor your conversations, even tailor the framework of expectations and even projects that you give them that will then illuminate their strengths. And then once you begin to do that, I really believe in strength finders. So many people focus on what they're not good at and what their teams aren't good at. If you focus on the strengths of those individuals, they'll grow your business beyond what you could fathom. And so it's interesting because I played for several coaches, and some coaches did a good job for that, and some did a not so good job. And I feel like the coaches that are adored in the sport of football, basketball, a lot of them have unique relationships with their players, right? And they understand what to do to get the best out of them, and then also what not to do to derail them. And so I do think that's important. And I get it. Like in the journey of you and I coming up, maybe as younger leaders in this world, there was this dynamic of you had to get in line with your boss. That has flipped on its head because the people in the organization, which is most of them that are doing the work, they have the real power because they touch your customer or your member. So with that being said, engage with them, make them feel good about what they're doing, and then activate them. Let them go do it. Let them go win for you.
Two things come to mind. The first one is, and this is actually, somebody brought this up, and I always preach to my team. It's, you always want to build a superstar team, but not a team of superstars.
Ooh, that's good.
Right. The
That's
last
good.
time
Yeah.
somebody had a high salary cap, and they brought all this all-stars, and guess what happened? Didn't make the playoffs.
Didn't make the playoffs.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
It's crazy. Because to your point, you have to build your team around a dynamic, around people's strengths. You can't just throw a bunch of talent together and think it's going to work.
And what can I add something, Tanvir? For the executives out, spend some time developing your internal talent too, because if a culture, there's times when you get the fortune of setting the culture, but there's most of the time when you assimilate to a culture. When there is a culture and a healthy culture of a business that you've created, be very cognizant of going out externally and just feeling like you're going to hire in the next person that's going to solve this problem, but they're also going to be able to culturally fit or engage with the organization. And I feel like businesses, leaders, we make that mistake every time, thinking, what we don't know or what we don't have, we can go get somewhere else, versus in taking time to develop the teams that you have in front of you and give them exposure. And then the positive is they get to activate the culture that they've been a part of, and then the new knowledge that they've been given.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you don't want to bring in, like, I always say this to people. It's like, I'd rather hire somebody with potential than someone with 10 years of experience who's stuck in their ways. And I've done it.
Right. Me too. Both ways. I've done it both ways. I am learning. I am still on this journey. So I'm sharing. Hey, you are welcome for me sharing what I'm still working on. Man.
Oh man. It's like, get the 3 H's, right? Humble, hungry, hardworking.
I love that, man. That's good. I'm still in that one.
Yeah.
Tanvir.
It's all yours, man. Hey, Cedric, for student athletes, right? So a lot of student athletes watching the podcast. Great way to transition from NCAA to sports, or NCAA to Sam's Club or Walmart. A lot of great values you brought with you along the journey. Mm-hmm. How can someone today, a student athlete today in their 4th year, at least in Canada, and most schools actually slash the 4th year of athletics. So they have a year, right? I know in the NCAA, a lot of the games got canceled, playing in arenas. So it's really a hard time for student athletes. What can they be doing today to prepare themselves to transition after their years are over of a student athlete?
Well, the first thing to prepare is we all aren't going to make it professionally. So, Tanvir right? And I, that's it, man. So I want to sit in front of you and first tell you that if you have played a sport at a high level in the collegiate ranks and you don't play professionally, that is not failure in that sport. That is not failure for you. So that's the first thing I want to say. One thing I wish I would have done, and I had to start, at a very entry level because I didn't do this. I earned my degree, but interning, I think engaging and connecting with, your university, not just your student athlete, counselor, like the university, finding out what internships and things you can engage in. Like that's going to be critical because it's going to get you exposure to this professional world. And you might find out that you're really suited for that. And you're going to feel more confident that when this thing ends, I'm not going to have any problems. And it would eliminate the depression that athletes go through in trying to figure out life after going from this physical sport to now this, kind of mind share strategic approach in life. The next one I'd say is, gain the perspective, of your coaches. And when I look at coaches, I look at them as leadership. That's the executive team. So, one of the things I wish I would have done, I didn't do this. So this is like if I were to go back, I would try this, like help on the administrative side of a scouting report. Actually be a part of that journey. Okay. And it's not saying that you're going to be talking to the coach like, oh, you're going to be a great coach one day. It's understanding how they see the game, which will then allow you to translate that into the reality of what you do. And then, I had mentioned this already, so I'll say it really quickly. There's a game within a game. And when the buzzer goes off, the scoreboard does not determine winning or failure, even for that team or even for you individually, even if you miss the last shot. It's about, did you get better? Is there something you're going to learn from that? And then lastly, man, that this sticks with me right now is the pain of discipline versus the pain of regret. If you want to stay disciplined and do things, that pain cultivates growth. If you want to have the pain of regret because you weren't disciplined, that pain comes with a lot of therapy, is what I would say, and a lot of psycho challenge, right? And mental strain. And so I have that actually, on my board in my office, the pain of discipline versus the pain of regret. And my goal is to choose the pain of discipline every day, so then I can aspire to grow. So that's what I would say to those student athletes out there. And love yourself. You're going to be all right. Like in the most challenging moments with injury, you will pull through it, man. Like if God willing, you get to wake up the next day, man. Hang in there.
Beautiful. That's awesome. So powerful, man. That's amazing. I want to touch on a second point because it jogged a memory. In football, there's a defensive, the nose tackle, and in defense, there's a system, right? And the system, I had a job to do, which was to make sure that my linebackers are clean so they can go and make a tackle. At that point, I was like, hey, I don't want to do that. I want to go make this. I want to be the one making the tackle. So
you want to make the play.
I want to make the play, right? First 2 years of my career, I would sometimes not be disciplined. I would sometimes not do my job and just go and make the play. I missed a tackle. And guess who's on my linebacker? The O-line's on my linebacker right now. And the running back runs free for a 20-yard run.
Yes.
As I got older, I realized there's a system. And I need you to looking at the system from a bird's eye view versus just your own role.
Yes.
Right? Yes. So spend time with your coach on the scouting report. That's it. You'll learn, and that's part of business.
Yeah, and they're not just barking at you. And I get it, man. Some coaches, there's times when I felt it was personal, but there's always in between the message and through the weed and how they do it, there's always a nugget. And, I wish I would have slowed down to think about that and being more premeditated. But I will tell you, at least I had the aptitude and learning agility to understand that now. And it's actually helped me to see other perspectives in the business world.
Amazing. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, Cedric, this is such a powerful episode. I'm so glad you're on the podcast. For me, a lot of memories, but also a lot of motivation, a lot of inspiration. So thanks so much for jumping on. And before we end, can you tell all the listeners and the viewers about your podcast and where can they tune in and subscribe?
Yeah. So the DäBU Podcast, DABU, myself, Cedric Clark, and Kojo Mensah-Bonsu, we're co-hosts, and we're on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Apple, everywhere you can find it. We also have a Instagram, the DäBU, at the DäBU, and then we have a TikTok. So if you search my name, Cedric Clark, or search the DäBU Podcast, we would love for you to engage with us. We've been engaged, Tanvir, on some racial and a lot of challenge in what's going on. But, we also had a 2 episodes on toxic masculinity, masculinity and understanding that as men. But I would love for people to connect. And I tell you what, this is what I'll say for the listeners, and I'm going to obviously get the people that are on my platform to understand this. Keep up what you're doing, Tanvir. This is changing the world when I think about talking to those leaders that make hiring decisions. And so I'm grateful for what you do, and I will stay a fan, and hopefully I'll get the opportunity to get you on mine, and hopefully I can jump back on yours.
Well, hey, sometime. I appreciate it. That means the world, man. It's really appreciate it. Everybody listening, watching, hey, subscribe, follow DäBU Podcast. Love what you're doing. Great message. Cedric, keep it up, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Team, remember to like, subscribe, and share with a friend, and visit tanvirbangu.com for a ton of free content and exercises.